Anyway, so what did you want to do with this interview now?
Well, this is really about Cornell West and the Green Party, as far as I understood, was our idea.
I think Dan had things he wanted to say.
Well, I do, but that's just because I got the impression that you wanted to hear about the conflicts that have been going on with you.
Yeah, what I wanted to do was have you completely state your case in a way that, you know, identifies the issues at stake for the future of the party.
It would take a very long time to do that on
And
a camera.
what are these bylaws?
I don't have the. Let me tell you a story, and this won't really translate to radio or camera very well. I'll try to do this quickly because it's just on my phone. It's going to take me a few minutes to bring up, but this story starts in the year 2020. Actually, it doesn't start there, but this chapter of the story starts in 2020. There was precursors, and there's always been a certain amount of drama going on. But this is the moral of this story. This is the transparency page for PGP Lane Chapter's Facebook page. Showing when it was created, January 2014.
All right, what is it? Come on.
Go ahead and have a look.
No, but who's going to, it's people listening, what are you going to say about it?
Well, this is the beginning of the story, because the fighting has centered around this Facebook page. Ordinarily, a Facebook page is something that's easy to create, and it's not really that big a deal, but like a MacGuffin, the orange thing in the suitcase in Pulp Fiction, people fight over it. It hardly even matters what it is. So this changes, and this happens in a lot of organizations. It just progresses and evolves to, well, what are we going to fight about next?
What's the title of the page?
Pacific Green Party Lane. At the time, it had a different title. I think it was called Lane Greens Chapter Pacific Green Party. But the moral of the story comes first, is that this page was created in the year 2014. It was created by a local chapter member, but when I say local, I just mean someone that lives here. We don't have exclusively local chapters. That's reflected in our bylaws. Named Sabrina Siegel. She was the page creator. Years later, other people, such as myself, Connor Salisbury, Natalie Paravicini, a lot of other people joined the party, and sometime around, this was during or after 2016, which is at least 2 years later. And at some point in a convention in Lake Oswego, Connor was tasked with creating fake pages for chapters that didn't exist on Facebook in the hope that people would join them and then create chapters out of them. That did not apply to our page.
Say that again. Connor was tasked by somebody?
At a convention, and then by the SCC, which manages things on the state level but not the local chapter level, with creating fake pages, just shell pages, just creating like Coos Bay page or Deschutes County page, something like that, and then hoping that people from there who were registered green would join and eventually create chapters, because we don't really have chapters anymore. 20 years ago, there were flourishing chapters with tens or dozens of members that had their own budgets, their own activities. Now we have about 2 chapters left, Lane and Lynn Benton. Now there's 2 in Lane, but none of them really function on the old model of, well, you have a chapter meeting, regular meetings, etc., etc. But back to the point, and the moral of this story is that those shell chapters had nothing to do with our page, which already existed. And I'm a little bit off the top of the frame on that, if it's going to be a video.
Here's a slouch.
If it tilts.
It doesn't
That's
tilt,
okay,
that's the
yeah.
problem.
Okay, is that all clear so far?
Yeah.
Okay, our page, created by Sabrina Siegel, 2014. 2 or 3 years later, other pages that didn't really mean anything were created by someone working for the state from the state level. Okay, that's completely separate. The state party does not have any authority over the activities of chapters. That's an explicit bylaw of our party. We have a separation of powers like that. Besides which, the page itself is a matter of intellectual property belonged to Sabrina and to the members that were posting it. Okay, roll forward to 2020. 2020 becomes, politics turns into, of course, a natural censorship war happening in media and government, and it boiled into the Green Party, where one particular member of PGP Lane, Connor, decided that he would take it upon himself to enforce restrictions on posting about COVID from the other members. Long story short, he went to SCC members and asked them for permission to kick all the other admins off of our page.
Oh, you mean, so there was an anti-vaccine movement that was on the PGP?
We were posting our opinions as we saw fit. That was our general consensus in the chapter was to do that. We all had the right to represent ourselves, and in the party we had the right to represent ourselves as a chapter.
Yeah.
Connor didn't agree, but he was in the minority. He was a minority of one, basically trying to direct that we had to post things in line with his views.
Well, it's
So
not only his views. It's a,
Well, he called it COVID nuttery, for example, and he before.
but there actually was somewhat of a consensus against vaccine as well as in favor of, lockdowns and vaccine and social isolation.
There was a
Wearing
lot,
masks is another thing. There was a large consensus around that. Let's admit that. It wasn't like a freak idea. But he decided that he would use the power of the
Let's remember, we're talking about the Green Party,
right, and we're
Yeah.
talking about it.
which is historically an opposition party.
yeah, that's a good point.
It's not there just to rubber stamp the mainstream in anything.
So it should have been free speech, right?
More importantly, we're talking about a grassroots organization where we don't have this kind of top-down level control. And that's very clear in our organization, but what happened was, after failing to persuade us to see things his way and restrict our posting on COVID to his liking, he went and started talking to certain SCC members who, apparently believing that they had the authority to do so, told him, okay, kick all the other admins off and we'll take over the page. Basically, and he did. Basically, he de-adminned myself. The other admins were myself, Sabrina, and Sabrina was the creator, and Ibrahim. You know Ibrahim, right? Taylor.
Oh, no, I mean Ibrahim. Wasn't he?
He was a senatorial candidate.
What's the last name?
Taylor.
Hura.
Ibra Taylor.
Tahir.
Oh, sure.
So,
Okay, yeah.
so that was the other three admins. He took the page over from everyone else, and then he put Ken Adams, who is from Salem, has never been a member of the chapter, but was on the SCC at the time, in charge of the page, though we didn't know that because we were kicked off and we couldn't see who the admins were anymore. And then we also he removed himself also as admin. So that went along. I figured out that we could file a copyright claim and get our page back, which really pissed them off, but that's a little bit down the road. Another process issue with this is that I was also on the SCC at the time, and so was Ibra. So this was behind the SCC's back, pretty much. Connor went to talk to Natalie and to Ken, who gave him the so-called authority to do this, and there was no meeting. There was no SCC decision to that effect. There was an SCC meeting a couple of days later. When I went, I brought up the issue that, well, our Facebook page has been taken over. I think Connor did it, so you might want to put the state resources and protect those from something similar happening.
Were
They
you on
blocked
the
it.
SCC at the time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they blocked that. Natalie blocked it, I think. But more importantly, they didn't mention one word that they had given this so-called authorization to Connor, which is, again, contrary to our process. The transparency rules don't allow the SCC to operate like that. They don't allow certain members
So
to
they
declare
were doing
themselves.
it quick and dirty, but then they found out, oh, wait a minute, I'm not sure we have the authority to.
Well, that's a whole nother ball of wax, because I have a feeling that I might get people lost in the weeds with details, but another secondary moral to this story is that when someone who is acting an authoritarian is caught, they can't admit that they've been caught. They can't admit that they've done anything wrong, because then the authority that they try to hold, they look too fallible, they look wrong, and they don't want to fall. So it leaves the only option then is to try to flip it, to try to make the person they were wronging into the wrongdoer, or to try to destroy them. So to this day, Natalie and Ken, I've not heard one word of them, or from Connor, admitting that they didn't have authority to take over Sabrina's page. And it is, for all intents and purposes, Sabrina's page ultimately, because she created the page, she's the founder, and beyond that is the chapter. Now to hark back to the MacGuffin thing, it's only a Facebook page. But in that Facebook page and all the fighting that's gone around it is just a reflection of the organizational and process issues that we have within the party. And that, in my opinion, and it manifests itself in Facebook pages and trying to kick people out, expel members. The main problem, the theme that leads to this over and over again is that not everyone is really practicing grassroots democracy in good faith. There are people that believe that they should be in charge and believe that they should be controlling things to the point to where they can censor and control what other people say and even take their property. The SEC has even claimed to own my property. I have a banner that was bought by Ibrahim, and it's my personal property, and it says Pacific Green Party on it. And I wrote Lane on it, so it represents our chapter, which we're even supposed to do, when we're representing as a chapter. But in point of law, it's my banner, because Ibrahim gave it to me. And so the party, somehow, the party meaning certain SEC members representing the state, they decided, well, no, it says Pacific Green Party on it, so it must belong to us. So year after year after year, they don't let this go. Earlier this year, they decided they were going to try to disaffiliate, quote unquote, Lane chapter because of a long list of offenses, and this was one of them, that I had misappropriated the state party banner. And the list of this stuff goes on and on and on, so that people's eyes glaze over.
By the way,
like I can see your eyes glazing over right now, and people just stop paying attention.
No, I have a
Ibrahim was
question.
our Green Party candidate for the Senate against Wyden, so it wasn't like he was just some idle guy that wanted press. So he had a Green Party banner, part of his campaign.
And so was Dan, also a Green Party candidate for
I was
Senate.
against Wyden. Hebrew was against Merkley.
Merkley, yeah. Well, my question, unless you have one, Todd, is was there some change in the bylaws that could have prevented this? It seems clear that the Greens want to promote grassroots democracy, but the bylaws or the practice didn't allow it. Brian Setzler has come up with a proposal for bylaws that will be up at this next convention. Will Brian's proposal, is that something that would have prevented this sort of centralization and the seizure of chapter resources in the name of the centralized power? Would it have prevented that?
Yeah, and blocking free expression.
Censorship, yeah.
What it would have done, and I cooperated with him on this, what it would have done would be to revise the organizational model from the notion of having to ask permission from the top level before you can form a group, which is still currently the case. If you want to create a chapter, the first thing you have to do is round up 5 supporting members. Now, supporting membership used to be a really special thing that meant donating money or donating a certain amount of volunteer time with a recognized chapter. Now, that second thing, how are you supposed to do that if you don't have a recognized chapter yet? So that's the cart before the horse. It was pretty unfair. And besides which, after you do that, then you have to contact the SEC, which is the state party officers, and ask them for approval to form a chapter. You're not a chapter until you're approved, which is a recipe for wannabe gatekeepers to just move in and occupy those little positions and say, well, okay, be the decider. Well, you can be approved and you're not. By doing that, they can then manipulate and gerrymander the topic of supporting membership, which determines who can vote at conventions. So what Brian proposed was to liberalize it to the point where you only have to have 3 people, you just have to be registered green, and all you got to do is say, well, we people, 3 or more, we're doing this, we call ourselves that, we're a cell. He called it a cell. And then you just notify the state, like, hey, we exist. State puts you on a list so everyone else knows you're there. Brian calls this the distributed network model. You don't need a hierarchy, someone in charge to tell you what to do. You just do things. That's what grassroots organization is. People just group together as they see fit, do stuff, and they communicate with each other sideways. You don't have to have someone in the middle saying, okay, well, here's the forum, and then here's the forum rules, and you can't say this or that, or you'll
Kind
get
of like
moderated.
turning 21.
Well, then let me ask a question then. If any of these groups can self-establish, then any bunch of KKK or Nazi or Antifa or anybody who wants to come up and say, hey, this is what the Greens are all about. And what that does is hugely discredits the Greens and makes it unlikely to achieve popular support by the existence of these. Actually, they could easily be operated as agent provocateur groups, you know, that were paid by the Democrats or the Republicans or the usual, you know. So what's the defense against that? Because you said, why can't anybody open up a chapter and call it the Greens? That's what I'm asking.
The defense is that it doesn't need to be defended against. It's a pure fantasy that there's going to be a mass infiltration of so-called Nazis. What does happen sometimes is that, and this happens just in all of activism, is that people will call each other Nazis when it becomes convenient to raise exactly that specter that they are unacceptable.
No, please, there is such a thing as agent provocateur who cripple important activist movements. And
Yes.
so how could you defend against that?
We
Yeah.
haven't. Who do you think these people are?
Right.
Exactly, that's right.
In
Yeah, but very well.
a grassroots organization,
But it goes back to
there's
those bylaw things.
experience. Okay, implementing true grassroots organization is not meant to be a panacea against the elements that already naturally pervade grassroots movements, including agents provocateurs. That's always going to happen. What the defense against it is that there are people who are actually motivated to pay attention and are working positively with each other as the model is intended and are able to recognize that. Now what Brian told me and caught my attention with his model was that the distributed network, in a hierarchy, like a bureaucracy, you always have people jumping up saying this person has to be kicked out. In a distributed network, once the agitators get recognized and they get marginalized by simply people don't want to work with them. And so they end up off to the side somewhere. Yes, they're members of the party, but it becomes obvious to anyone that pays even the slightest attention that they don't actually represent the party, if that makes sense. Now there was a second part to this that I was going to say before you questioned, and that is that no matter what bylaws you write, if you have a dynamic where somebody says they're in charge and is generally accepted to be in charge, then it doesn't matter what the bylaws say. They can just ignore them and do what they want. They say, well, no, well, yes, the bylaw says this, but then twist it around and say, well, actually, we interpret it that way. And unfortunately, there's people that don't really understand what interpretation of a law means. But there are people that take advantage of their position of being the interpreter to simply
So is there a
completely change.
bylaw structure that can I mean, this is a very large philosophical question. Can a structure prevent the breakdown of a movement or a party by at its early stages by the entry of people intent on disrupting that party, or that movement? And I've seen this throughout my lifetime, that only small numbers of people who are highly intelligent and experienced can just walk into, like MoveOn.org was a great example. There's no way you're going to have MoveOn.org not be infiltrated by lots of people who wanted to prevent progressive change within the Democratic Party. And so my question is the current movement to improve the bylaws of the state, can those actually prevent, you know, things like what Connor did, as well as the thing that he was trying to prevent?
What reversed what Connor did, I don't know that it could have been prevented. I think that he would have done it even if he hadn't got permission, is my opinion. But it's impossible to predict.
There's a personal reason that Connor allegedly had, which he thought that our advocacy against the narrative was hurting his employment. He was working for Occupy Medical, and he was claiming that people were losing patience because of what we were doing, which seems completely
it's bizarre.
Unlikely.
It's bizarre. Why would Occupy Medical give one freak one way or the other what the Green Party was doing? But he said that Occupy Medical, people like Occupy Medical and several other organizations that he was involved in, has started flagging our page for disinformation to reduce our reach on Facebook. So people are going to do that. Long story short, we got the page back pretty quickly. It's ours. They've contacted Facebook many times since then, just repeating the same nonsense that, oh, well, the state created this, Connor, we put him in charge of it. Well, they can't do that, and it's still our page. It's just a Facebook page, but the important thing is that this is all still going on.
Connor was just acting desperate about this.
To
a delusional degree.
How to prevent it is to remove these illusions of hierarchy that don't belong. And that is what Brian's bylaw proposals go a long way towards achieving, as long as they're not poison. I have a sense that some poison pills may be snuck in there somehow or other, or that they just might not pass because they need 2/3 majority. But if they do pass, then they could hopefully go a long way to removing these levers of power, top-down power that don't belong in a grassroots organization. Now, as I said, that can only happen if it doesn't remain there de facto anyhow. And unfortunately, the situation that we're in now is that the SCC has started to just unilaterally declare that the results of conventions were invalid. This happened in January when a set of resolutions was approved by the convention, and so the SCC, by a vote, decided that no, we're overturning that. And the pretext for overturning it was, as I mentioned, a very liberal interpretation of the bylaw that authorizes absentee voting. Absentee voting is allowed for votes on SCC members, on ballot initiatives and endorsements, and candidate nominations and endorsements. And this was just a set of resolutions. Absentee was not authorized, let alone required. So, but the pretext was that it hadn't been an absentee, so it had to be reversed. Comes the next convention in March. That convention, by a vote of I think 12-2 or 11-3, something like that, said no, the SCC is wrong. We affirm the result of the last convention. So guess what happens after that? Take a guess. Okay, well, where I'm going with the story, obviously, is after the March convention, the SEC goes back and they say yes again. Yet again, they say, oh no, the convention was wrong. These resolutions didn't pass. Now, remember the MacGuffin thing. These are just resolutions. These are resolutions about truth politics, 9/11, a resolution to endorse the Black Caucus, National Black Caucus position on vaccine mandates. Nothing with any real bearing on results or conventions or rules or anything. It was just a sense of the convention saying something, and now the SEC is saying, well, no, you can't do that. Okay, so
remember to drill it down on things that are recognizable, mileposts that people recognized that who don't have any of the inside, story that you're talking about. This is not an
Yeah.
inside story.
Okay.
Story.
True. Well, these are details, and they can be fact-checked, but it has gotten to the point where it's gotten way beyond just Lane chapter now, to where we have people that the conflict has migrated now to between the SCC and the convention,
Yeah.
which I should have already mentioned, but in the Pacific Green Party, if there is a top authority, it is statewide conventions, at which the supporting members make all these important decisions. And when it comes to candidates and ballot initiatives, all registered Greens have the right to vote on those. And there isn't an authority given to a centralized structure like our coordinating committee to simply unilaterally overturn a decision at a
So it's almost like a
convention.
country that doesn't have a constitution, but it has a legislature.
It's a power struggle. It's a power struggle because de facto there is so little awareness of what is going on. There are so few people involved at the moment. And hopefully, if we can restore the grassroots dynamic, more people will get involved, and that the hierarchy illusion will dissipate. It's not supposed to be their de jure. They're just not supposed to do this, but having enough people apparently believing they can, then they do. And of course, it's gone even beyond that, because more people are at the conventions that keep voting them down. So it's a minority that is now in a position of wielding a false authority over the majority, but the majority has got really no means of actually doing anything about it so far.
Any comments? Boiling over.
Yeah, so where do we go from here?
Well, our next convention is in September, and I don't know, I think
It's
that,
going to be not here.
well, it's going supposedly to be a hybrid convention of people that can be in specific locations. So there can be a here, but it will be statewide anyhow.
Oh, so like a nodal.
Right, and the main topic of the convention is supposed to be the bylaws, which apparently are the ones that Brian is again working on, and I've spoken to him, but I don't know exactly what's being proposed yet.
And what's the deadline for people to register for the Green Party in order to be able to vote, in that?
To vote on bylaws, you have to be a supporting member.
For how many months?
You have to be registered PGP, and you have to have
You figured this out, didn't you? John told me there's a deadline to, to register.
30 days. It is 30 days by 30 days prior to the convention. For anything requiring supporting membership, you qualify between a window of 30 days prior and 395 days prior, which is a year. There's a space of a year when you qualify either by making a donation or going to enough meeting time, which is about 90 minutes. However, thanks to my proposal in March, although I was only actually rehashing one of Brian's original proposals, now anybody who has been registered green for 24 months also qualifies, which it increases our supporting membership from like probably a few dozen to several thousand people.
Is that mailing going out to reactivate the Green associated people that they know from past years?
I don't know what's going to be on the mailing, and I am aware that a mailing is likely to be approved, and it's going to cost probably
A couple $1,000.
Yeah, 2,000 or 3,000, something like that, to send postcards to everyone in the state. It's not the first time we've done a mailing. There was a mass mailing in 2020, and it resulted, well, I don't know, some people would have shown up anyway. It resulted in 59 people showing up to vote for the presidential candidate.
And so,
And there's 8,000 members of registered Greens in Oregon, and 59 show up, and that is a record turnout. So the
record
Green,
low or record high?
Right.
yeah, so the Greens are just non-existent virtually.
Well, it doesn't have to be that way because they have been big in two.
Well, I'm going to get to that when it's my turn to talk.
It is your turn. Go
It's
ahead.
your turn, buddy. Heat it up.
Oh, okay, so I have a much broader view. You mentioned infiltrators, and I think the Green Party nationally And I'm on a Zoom with a number of other people from a number of different states. They all are complaining about the same thing. Very classic infiltration tactics. So the Green Party has been emasculated, probably starting when probably the 2000 election, when Nader was accused of being the spoiler and kept.
And the Democrats said never again.
Oh yeah, the poor, yeah. It's a good thing, I didn't know how bad the Democrats were at that time, but I subsequently have realized they are just as corrupt, if not more so, and just as dangerous, more so now. But anyway, so that was Ralph Nader's party. It was somebody complaining about corporate malfeasance and putting us all at risk, all us drivers at risk. Okay, that's worthwhile. We certainly have that in this country, so it's something to take a political stand on. Then, 2008, who do we have? Cynthia McKinney, 6-time congresswoman, who tells the truth about everything come what may. And they finally managed to gerrymander her out of office after 6 terms. So she's running. I think she'd already done her last Gaza boat trip, and then she comes back and she's going to run on the Green Party ticket. Okay, now the Green Party was established as an opposition party, not knee-jerk, but know what the hell you're talking about, So in 2020, she comes out already with a book. In later 2020, we were not maybe 8 months into the whole pandemic thing. She comes out with a book. It's an edited book with lots of very smart people writing chapters. Her own chapter is 40 pages long. It's about biowarfare. There's also a chapter in here by Whittington Webb. And Whitney goes into a number of very important things. She's already looking at the whole history of this. And I immediately spotted this whole thing as a psyops, because it's so familiar. I have seen it over and over and over again. And illness, viruses, have been used for 2-3 decades now. Right after 9/11, we suddenly have an anthrax mailings, and then we've had SARS and MERS and etc. So she immediately saw it as a psyops. I immediately went and looked up Francis Boyle on the internet to see what he'd said. And you may not know who he is because he's been banned from the internet for 20 years. Yeah, because right after the anthrax mailings, after 9/11, he was doing a lecture at a university somewhere, and somebody asked him a question, and he said, "Oh no, those mailings didn't come from Saddam or from Bin Laden. They came from Fort Detrick, Maryland. That's the only place on earth that has that kind of weapons-grade anthrax."
He was a lawyer. He practiced in the Chicago area, and he deconstructed about 10 lies one after another until the networks shut off the feed. That's what he did for a living,
Yeah, so they barred him from the internet, from mainstream internet in the United States.
Like,
soon
there's
after
no weapons
this,
of mass destruction? No, there's no weapons of mass.
as soon as this thing broke, and my immediate hypothesis was this is a psyops. It's right along the same MO that we've seen over and over and over and over. So I looked for him on the internet, and he's got an interview by some expat over in Kazakhstan or something, and he said, "Oh yeah, it's that we have this bioweapons lab at BSL 3 at University of North Carolina under Ralph Barrett, who's the leading expert in gain of function research in the world." And then, but the next week, he'd found another online paper. It was published in 2015 with people from the North Carolina shop and from Wuhan co-publishing a paper, and from Scripps Institute in San Diego, my hometown, which has been involved in bioweapons research for a long time. And they're the ones who published that very quick article, like, "Oh no, this was natural origin, could not have been biology," or blah blah blah. And Boyle said, "Well, they're part of the system. They get lots of nice grants to do bioweapons research, gain of function research. So anyway, that was, and then I started gathering data. And I have a 6-chapter PowerPoint I put together just using screen captures. I found out that Anthony Fauci had published an op-ed in the New England Journal of Medicine, of all places, our leading journal, on February 28th of 2020, saying, oh, well, he'd been in touch with Xi Zhengli in China, which we found out has been his collaborator over there. And she said, oh yeah, well, it hasn't been that bad. We have a case fatality rate of about 1.4%. And so he publishes his op-ed and he said, well, it shouldn't be any more than a bad flu season. That was 2 weeks before the lockdown, you know. And it's just gone on from there. Just bullshit after bullshit after bullshit after bullshit.
Anyway, there's an entire total story about COVID and the lockdowns and everything.
So, well, let me finish now.
Oh, okay, but not for because I only have 1 hour
the
of
Green
tape here.
Party of Oregon.
I think I got only
The
how many
Green
minutes?
Party of Oregon, supposedly, because it consists of like 6 people up in Portland who claim to represent the Green Party of Oregon, they're adhering in lockstep to the government narrative, to the Fauci narrative, to the Democratic narrative, Republican narrative, a whole goddamn bunch of them. Okay, so, but this is the first time I've seen this in the Green Party. When I first joined the Green Party, which I think was even before Dan did, it was years ago, I mean, it's just 7 or 8 years ago, it's just a default from Republicans and Democrats. What the hell should you register? You got to register to vote somewhere. So I attend their conference that year, which was in Salem. And I'll never forget this. There's one guy in the party who's been in the party a long time, Marv San. He lives in Salem. And he always tells the truth about everything. He's been on top of 9/11 and all of this. And so they were ridiculing him. The whole pack of them up there were isolating and ridiculing Marv for disbelieving the 9/11 fairy tale. I said, good Lord, this is an opposition party. So then I think the next incident was a few years ago. The state convention was up in Scio, or some little farm town up there in between Portland and Eugene. And so we were driving up with Ibra Taher, that you didn't know of. But anyway, Ibra was running.
He showed up at People's Forum and gave a couple of good rants.
Okay, yeah. Ibra was running for the Senate against White, or against Merkley, one of the two, I don't know.
Right.
They're carbon copies almost, but so he has to stop for donuts, and we're running 20 minutes late. So Nathalie calls him and says, "Oh well, you know, I can take over and get things going until you get here." Well, she just took over the convention, and I was on the scheduled speaker list, the very last one. The minute it's my turn, she ends the convention. Oh. And she didn't even know me that well, but I was unpredictable to her. But you know what I was going to say. So we're not going to allow that. But this is the kind of really childish, blatant, the most transparent kind of manipulation. And she's this way. She is a master manipulator, and she spends a lot of time at it. So it's quite credible to me that she might be getting paid for this, you know. Now, the thing that she did that's really egregious, I think, is a very serious violation as far as the party should be concerned.
After this, we'll wrap it up. Move on to some.
She was running for governor last time, and she is a naturopathic physician, and there was an action being taken against her by her state licensing board. And she didn't tell anybody. She never told the party that at all.
And this was through 2 nominating conventions. The first was in early June. She didn't mention that she had this coming up. Well, apparently, from what I can gather, she did know that it was going to become an issue. During June, she didn't mention it. up for nomination. And then we had a second nominating convention in August where she also didn't mention it. And then, I'll let Jack continue.
So anyway, so by the time she finally lets everybody know, it's too late to nominate anybody else. So we're denied a gubernatorial candidate
Right, she
that
withdrew.
year. And
Yeah,
then,
recall.
to top things off, she goes to Tina Kotek and she offers to kind of withdraw, because she would have pulled some votes from the Democrats. She offers to withdraw in exchange for Kotek agreeing to support ranked choice voting.
Campaign
And we didn't
finance
agree to that.
reform.
She had no right to do that. She had no authority to do that. And this is the kind of high-handed nonsense that she pulls all the time. And she keeps everything focused on trivia. You know, just absolute, party trivia. Now, she's not, she and this guy, Seth Woolley, I suspect are paid infiltrators because they're so effective. Seth is the worst asshole I've ever met in my life. He really is.
Wait, I thought
Can't
we were
say
going
that
to
on radio.
cap it off one more subject, because I didn't come here to listen to a broadcast which you do every week, and I already understand your points.
Well, this is the Green Party. Seth manages to
Okay, but you have to cap it
alienate.
up. You can't just go on forever, endlessly, because you'll never stop if someone doesn't ask you to.
Seth has
Well, go ahead,
a
move it-
talent
move it
for
forward, we want
alienating
time.
alienating
Yeah.
everybody.
I've heard it, so anyway, go
Okay.
ahead.
So they have effectively prevented the Green Party from being a serious political party.
Yeah.
So there should be a lot of interest in Dr. Cornell West. I know Todd is a big fan, and it should draw a lot of people to the Green Party. How can the Green Party keep them and organize them and get them to this burst of new members? What's the plan to get them involved and active?
Do they have a plan?
Cornel West is a good man, and I've been reading and watching him for 20 years. He's not hard to understand. He has basic principles that he explains over and over again in every different way, and it's based on compassion and that everyone, the powerless and the people at the bottom of society are entitled to be considered equally with the people in power at the top of society. Fortunately, we have like a few more seconds on this chip. So, accordingly, his postures on political issues are not hard to predict. Let's say one of the biggest issues is economic concentration of economic power and wealth at the top. He straightforwardly asks that the system of American politics and economy should be restructured so that the people at the bottom have economic resources. They have a place to live, they have health care, they can take care of their families, they're not driven into desperation and traumatic stress and thrown out to the street as we see thousands of people here in Eugene. His narrative is entirely relevant to everyone in Eugene, and his behavior once elected would be predictable because he's not a poll taker and he's not beholden to funders or anything of this nature. He's like kind of an incorruptible person. He's a preacher. I mean, what do you say? But he elaborates on what his philosophy implies for the climate and what it implies for war and violence. And it's really not too many steps from compassion for all people to what we should do regarding, prosecuting global wars as we are today. And for that reason, I think he would be a wonderful president, but more he would attract many people to the Green Party, and they would be the sorts of people that I would like to see in the Green Party. They are not, the libertarian philosophy is that the well-being of the individual is the ultimate, compass for the well-being of a society. Because if each person takes care of ourselves, and there's just some rationale to this, and like ants, they all take care of the well-being, or bees, the well-being of the swarm. But what humans do is that if each person makes sure that we take care of ourselves and we take care of our children and we do our part to achieve as much as the human potential can achieve, then that is the as far as they got in 1787, and it just gotten us a long way. But now it turns out that there's an awful lot of people who are not even close to realizing their potential or exercising their capabilities or being able to compete, as you might say, or get enough to eat or a place to live. And when you get to the point where you have 20 or 30% of the population that are unable to live, then you need a socialist model of some sort to take care of those people, of which at least 10 or 15% are wholly disabled people. By their cognitive disability, like 10% of the country is below 80 of IQ and can't hold down employment. Norman Peterson, or whatever that guy, fucking Peterson guy, goes on and on about this. So Cornel West is the anti-Jordan Peterson candidate, and he's got heart, and I'll be happy to trust him for the time being. On to you guys. What about Cornel West?
I tend to agree with Cornel West's position when it comes to U.S. imperialism, and in particularly the Ukraine war, which is my #1 issue and has been since it's heated up. What I would say to yourself, Todd, and to everyone else who joins, quote unquote, joins the Green Party because, or registers Green, let's say, because of Cornel West, welcome to the party. I should caution you that he is not our candidate yet. He is likely to be, but there are other candidates, and it just comes down to our nominating conventions.
He is a candidate for Green Party, just as Trump is a candidate for the Republican.
Correct. He's a candidate for nomination.
He's a candidate for nomination.
So,
absolutely.
So, I wish you success in supporting his campaign. What I'd advise you to do, or at least suggest, is that you contact the campaign and start engaging with it directly. Because if you come into the party organization and ask, well, what do I do? You're gonna run into people that may not support him, may support other candidates, but worse than that, you're gonna run into people who are just dying to tell you what to do. And they'll want you to fall into that trap and say, well, here's the rules, this is what the party says. They want to rope you into saying, well, now the party says this or that, you can form this chapter, you can form this group with our permission.
Yeah, great.
Don't do that.
Yeah.
Don't do that. Form your own stuff, create your own resources, form a group, Pacific Greens for Cornel West. And maybe one day your group will split and there'll be Pacific Greens for Cornel West and Pacific Greens in favor of Cornel West, something like that. Doesn't matter. As long as the energy is there and you're working for his campaign, that's how you get things done.
I think my main reservation about Cornel West, same as Jill Stein, they have no experience running anything political. They have no experience that qualifies them for office. I mean, Cynthia McKinney actually had 6 terms in the U.S. Congress. She knows how the sausage is made. She knows how the lobbyists work. She knows all the ropes. Cornel West is a philosopher, basically. He has good general ideas, but I think he seems very naive about a lot of what really goes on. I've seen him in a couple of interviews where he just didn't have the facts. So he's got to stop calling people brother so-and-so, and I know, this brother and that brother can get along, blah, blah, blah. He's got to learn how to fight. He's got to learn how to call a spade a spade, It's not brother Biden, Biden needs to be...
Oh, yeah, thanks, Dan.
It's not brother Biden or brother Trump or any of them, All the psychopaths who have been running the country since Kennedy, since Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter is the last normal human president we've had. And you've got to be able to call things as they are, because there's a lot of very angry people, and they're angry at something and at someone, and he's not going to attract them by calling everybody his brother. and being vague in these generalities.
I was in the military, and I saw the behavior of corrupt people.
Yeah.
And I was in the accounting business. I did auditing, of the purpose of which was to find corruption and write up reports about it. And anyway, it depends where you lived, what your life experience is. And he didn't have lived experience in, here's a great example is,
I guess my point is that the population is heavily saturated with negative feelings right now. Loss of job, loss of people who've died post-vaccine, distrust in government completely. There's a huge amount of negative affect in the country. And I don't know if he's able to address that, if he's able to acknowledge that there is evil in the world. There really is evil.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I was going to mention it was Chris Hedges. He's the opposite because he's been on the ground in all these different battlefields and everything. So, but yeah, I mean the reality of evil. But I think you don't. Do you need to know? Supposing he had supposing presidents had influence over policy, they actually don't. But they do have the bully pulpit. They have the microphone, and I think that you're actually. I think I agree with you that it would help if if his talks were more convincing. And RFK is very convincing because he is able to connect with different sorts of people with different sorts of experience. And I think Cornell doesn't connect.
And that's the other. I mean, RFK is actually the strongest candidate. His expose on Fauci was, a bestseller for weeks, and he has people are.
That's his weakest point politically, but he has many stronger points.
Yeah, and he's been in a political family all his life, so he is the stronger candidate. I would be concerned with Cornel West taking votes away from him if he becomes the Democratic candidate, or even if he runs as an independent. Because I think Cornell has a whole attitudinal issue that he's facing. He's got an angry electorate who are unemployed, have lost their businesses, have lost loved ones. They're recognizing this whole terrible manipulation by big pharma.
Or they're displaced themselves on the streets, So how can they resonate with an appeal to compassion when they're actually the object of compassion?
Yeah.
And nobody's showing them very much compassion.
And it isn't just the usual objects of compassion that Cornell's objected to, people who are left out of the system. You see, these are people who have an acute and unexpected losses. And what's been done to small business. Look at all the small businessmen that have gone under from this lockdown, which is completely predictable. There were health economists that were predicting this right from the beginning. And lockdowns. I remember those two, incidentally, remember those two Bakersfield doctors that were on early and they said masks don't do anything? Well, I just met the head of the hospital. He's now the head of McKenzie Willamette Hospital.
Oh.
The guy who was head of the hospital they worked with. Yeah. I met him at the DAC, we were in the shower at the DAC. But anyway, there's a lot of very angry people, and I'm one of them, And this whole thing about Ukraine, it isn't...
It's the latest.
It isn't Brother Zelensky, and he's a good man. It's so fun. You're not going to... You've got to call a spade a spade. I mean, Jesus did, didn't he? He went through and ran the money changers out of the temple. He was not a nice guy.
Yeah, the original Aramaic was kick their asses.
That's right.
Well, anyway.
Yeah. One thing I'd like to add to that is to have an effect in a minor party campaign. If you want to contribute to that, if you are motivated, as Jack says, by the candidate, to take action and put your energy into it, help the campaign. Because the campaigns, through the campaigning is about the funds and the volunteering. The green candidates do not get the funds. RFK Junior has got not only funds, but he's got a ton of volunteers, and there's a lot of energy in his campaigns. And if Dr. West is going to compete with that, he'll need to get people out there.
He can get messages out.
So again, right? If you want to help his campaign, that's what you do. If you do that, if you go to the Green Party officers and say, well, how can I help the campaign? First thing they're going to do is say, well, you can do this and you can't do that, and then you can join this group where we'll argue about what to do ad nauseum. I'm an alternate delegate to national, and the arguing has already been going on since he first declared for like 2 months. There's people that are for him, people that are against him, and all there is. And these are like the head honchos, the co-chairs of this state and that state, secretaries and whatnot. And they're the people that are supposed to be, making things easy for the candidates and just running things so that the candidates can get somewhere. And instead, they're just going into the back rooms and trashing each other and arguing endlessly about which candidate should or shouldn't be supported. The vast majority of them, when it comes down to it next year, whoever the nominee is, are not really going to lift a finger much one way or the other to actually help. Because campaigning is way, way different from this organizing, this high-level organizing that goes on. And you're going to want to have someone be in charge and be the manager and then put people in charge of this and that. It's actually really easy now that I've run a campaign, though I did it myself. It's pretty easy to do. All you have to do is advertise. You just have to count how many people haven't heard of you, and that's the first hurdle for Green Party candidates. When people see their ballot, 9 out of 10 of them are not going to have heard your name. They're just going to see you also. You're an also-ran with maybe a libertarian or a progressive or an independent. They're looking at the Democrat and the Republican. And then they say, oh, well, who's this? And then you get one chance with your voter pamphlet statement, which means you need volunteers helping you to make sure that qualifies. And then, if you're smart, you can advertise or build it. If you can get a network of volunteers to actually do it, you can actually get over that hurdle of who hasn't heard of you. And I know a lot of people think everyone has heard of Cornel West, but Cornel West is a lot of people in certain spheres, certain political groups and currents have heard of Cornel West, but the general public has not. So he will face that hurdle too. So, all I'm saying is...
I knew this thing was going to run out.
Okay, well, that's okay because I rambled it.
We got plenty
I
of
hate-
stuff to edit down, I think.
Yeah, too much.
Did you want to do like a closing summary at all, or like a wrap up? Like,
Yeah,
I think you kind of
Right.
steered people away from the party and toward individual campaigns based on your experience.
No.
Is that the final word?
No, I'll wrap that up then.
Oh, okay.
Well, I mean, I think it's a matter of taking back the party. You need a party platform to become a political candidate, but it's a matter of taking back the party. And I think we have Chuck and I have put together a real survey.
Chuck Fall you're referring to.
Pardon?
They may not know who Chuck is.
Chuck Fall of the Green Liberty Caucus.
Yeah, Green Liberty. Yeah. And anyway, the point is we're sending out our own survey, and it has to do with substantive issues. It has to do with the 4 assassinations of the 1960s, and with 9/11, and with COVID, and all of these things. And there's a straight line actually between them. I think people will see when they start thinking about it. But I think people still want these 4 seminal assassinations started everything.
Well, they were a continuation. They were not the original sin. They were a continuation of the exercise of power by the state.
What's the original sin?
Well, I think it was in 1945. There was actually before the end of World War II. There was a great degree of fluidity.
I think we're good. I'll wrap this since we're...
Let me make a final clarify
Oh,
then.
okay.
I just wanted to add that I don't mean to tell people who join the Green Party because of Cornel West to avoid organizing. I'm saying that if you want to contribute to the campaign, that's where to go, because the organization is not really fundamental to the campaigning itself. However, you should take part in the organization if for no other reason than to protect your rights as a member and to make sure that it retains as much as it still has, of the grassroots character that it is supposed to have, and hopefully help restore that to where it ideally has been in the past.